I can say this with 110% certainty. When we leave here election night, I can go lay my head down on my pillow and know that the will of the people was carried out because the votes were counted in the way the votes were cast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Rutherford County GOP podcast. I'm your co-host, Matt Harriman, here with Ross Bradley, and we are excited to welcome special guest Alan Farley, the Administrator of Elections for Rutherford County, as we are entering this election season. Obviously, 2026 is a big election year. We're going to be having elections starting in May, then in August, and then in November. And so we've got county primary elections coming up in May, and then county general elections in August, and then the more statewide and national elections come November. So we thought it would be a great idea to sit down with Alan and really just him to share his background, his story. A lot of people don't ever really interface with you really necessarily. They come and vote, and they probably know their people at their precincts that are always typically there. But we really wanted this podcast to be more informative, to give people information as we're heading into a really heavy election year.
Yeah, this might be the first nonpartisan podcast that we've done so far. So, Alan, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate y'all being here. Of course, I always welcome the opportunity to do what I can to promote and educate voters, and that's what we're here for. So, anytime we get an invitation, I always like to take it up and see what I can help provide.
Alan, what does the election administrator do? What is your daily job?
Well, the biggest thing is to make sure that we are operating under the law. TCA is what governs elections in Tennessee, and so the legislature actually sets the rules, and we're the ones who implement and conduct and administer the election to make sure that we're following those rules. Of course, I get people from all sides. They don't like this or they don't like that, and I just, I direct them. Well, you need to address those to the General Assembly because they're the ones who make the rules. We're just the ones that execute and make sure that those rules are followed.
So it's not just you. You have a staff of people that kind of work alongside you. Tell us a little bit about the whole department.
I do. Of course, we have 8 people that work in our office. We serve right at 220,000 registered voters, active and inactive voters, and so we. Our office is to make sure we keep the records. So we keep every voter registration form. It doesn't matter that if you registered in 1952, that original document is still on file in this office. And so we keep all the voter files. We keep the database. Do all the setup, preparing for each election.
So I'm curious, especially for maybe some of the younger people watching or anybody really, how in the world do you get the administrative elections job?
Well, I work for a board of commissioners. The election commission is set up in the state of Tennessee, which is unique, in which a lot of people, Texas has now started wanting to kind of follow our model that we have here in Tennessee, but the majority party in the state of Tennessee has 3 members of the commission. And then the minority party has 2 members. So they make up the 5-member commission. So the commission actually hires and fires the administrator. The administrator does not report to any elected official. So there's no issues of, okay, well, you need to make sure I win this office and get reelected. It takes that part out of it. So we work, of course, those members, the election commission, they are appointed by the state election commission. And then, of course, we work hand in hand with the Secretary of State's office because ultimately they're the ones who the Secretary of State is one that oversees all the elections in the state of Tennessee.
What is that relationship like, and how does that work as far as reporting back to the Secretary of State? Because I think even some people are like, what's the Secretary of State do? I mean, and actually the Secretary of State oversees a whole lot of things outside of elections.
Yeah, they really do. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to brag. He's not my boss, but we work close with Secretary Hargett. But Tennessee has the best Secretary of State in the nation. I'll give him that, because when we meet as a group of administrators who come together periodic throughout each year, he's always there. He communicates with us. And so, we have a state coordinator of elections, which Mark Goins is the one who's ultimately responsible for overseeing the state coordinating of elections statewide. And so they work with all 95 counties. But Secretary Hargett's one of those. He knows what's going on. He's been a leader at the national level dealing with elections. And so we have a good rapport. I was actually on a conference call with me and another administrator this morning, discussing a couple of items. And so we have a great relationship to where they'll call us and ask us questions, kind of frontline questions, because they don't actually take part in administering elections. We do that at the county level. So having that feedback and that two-way communication is good to have with the Secretary of State's office.
So I'm going to transition just a little bit. We have some folks within our party that they can tell you where all the polling locations are at. They can tell you the names of the poll workers. They're very detailed. And then we also have a big swath of our party and across the cities and county, that they don't know it's election time until they start seeing signs go up. Tell us a little bit about, so this year we have 3 different elections. Can you talk about the 3 different elections that we have? I oftentimes will talk to somebody and say, well, I voted in May. I didn't know we had another one in August or another one in November, or I'm just planning on voting in November. Can you kind of break us down like what the different elections are and what people are going to be voting in each of those different elections?
Absolutely. The May election, May primary, is our county primary. And so
that's May 5th, right?
That's this year will be May 5th. All of our elections are in even numbered years. So 2024, 2026, 2028. So basically state law says that in the gubernatorial cycle, this is a cycle that will elect the governor, and then of course we have the presidential cycle. So the gubernatorial cycle will have a May election. So the election is being held on the first Tuesday in May. And so this will be May 5th for this coming election year. And so at that point, we'll be electing the nominees for the Republican and Democratic parties. So we'll have candidates for mayor, sheriff, trustee, circuit court clerk, county clerk, register of deeds. I believe I've got all the constitutional offices there that's on the ballot this cycle. And then we'll also have our legislative, which is the county commission. And then we'll have a portion of the school board, the county school board, that will also be on the ballot. They run split terms where half of them run one cycle and then the other half runs a different cycle. But our county legislative body, which is our county commission, all 21, they all run at the same time. So they run every 4 years, every other cycle.
Okay, so that first when you come in, you're just voting for county officials, essentially. You're not voting for city council members. You're not voting for a state delegation or folks in Washington.
Right.
You're just voting for the county positions.
Only your county offices are on the ballot. With the exception, a couple years ago, the legislature changed to where all school boards. So we do have a municipal school board that will be on the ballot also too, because it's running in the primary. So this is the primary cycle.
Yeah. So Ross kind of alluded to this, and I kind of, I guess, want to toot your horn a little bit here because I think some other counties have taken this up. But I don't know how many years ago now you started a pilot program, which is now no longer a pilot program, which more or less it didn't do away with all precincts, but we were the first in the state under your leadership to start having vote centers. I know me personally, you probably have the data, but I think when I first saw that, and I think when others saw that, it's like, wow, that's a really great idea to incentivize people to vote and try and remove barriers. At least I know that was the intent. And basically what that means is if you live out in Christiana, but you work in Murfreesboro and it's most convenient for you to come here or to go to Sportscom or whatever big places you may work next to, or if you work in Nashville and it's easy for you to stop in Laverne on your way home and pop in and vote, you can do that. I think there may still be people that don't realize we could do that, but talk a little bit about that and kind of the nexus of that.
The law was actually passed in 2016. And so the first election was in 2018, the first election cycle that we implemented that. We developed the plan, and we were the pioneer. We were the kind of the pioneers to kind of go out on a limb and do that. But because what worked great for Rutherford County, now this method doesn't work great for everybody, but our county, as large as our county is, a lot of our people, they weren't getting an opportunity to vote because if you work in downtown Nashville, our polls, they're open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on election day. Well, if you have to be at work by 7:15, 7:30 in downtown Nashville, you got to leave at 5:30, 5:45 because all the traffic that you're flowing to Nashville with, you're also returning home. So one of the big things was that, okay, the same people that are leaving at 4:30, 5 o'clock, they're fighting that hour, 2 hour, traffic back home. Well, so if you live in the eastern part of the county, you could very easily be pushing, 7 o'clock to get back home to vote. Well, you could very easily stop in Smyrna or Laverne, or the closer you come into Murfreesboro, and vote at that location. Also, too, people who move, and this is the most fascinating thing with me is, you think, okay, I've lived in Rutherford County all my life. Really, I've lived in 3 places. I've where I grew up, and then I've moved twice after I left home, but all here in Rutherford County. But you can actually, there's a numerous amount of people who just move within the county. But when you're assigned a precinct, back up, when you're have an assigned polling place, well, the fact is you've moved, so you would have to go. Well, you don't vote here anymore, so you'd have to go to a fail-safe site. So a lot of times people are like, I'm just not going to do that. So under the vote center model, you change your address there, just like you do during early voting. Really, it's the early voting model on election day. And so so that actually, we had voters who actually participated instead of just going, you know what, I'll change my address at some other time and I'll vote next election. So that was really the big incentive to get people more participation. People at lunchtime, they may work in Industrial Park in Laverne, live here in Murfreesboro, but they can go just right down the street at lunchtime, and then they're not hitting that 5 o'clock. Everybody shows up at the polls, right there at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and then you have to stand in line. It has been a model that has been very, very, very well received here in Rutherford County, and even though we're now in our 5th election cycle, I still get calls or when I see people, man, this is the greatest thing. We're really glad that y'all have done this.
And I think there's been a few counties replicated. I think Williamson has done it.
There's 7 counties now that have followed our lead. So you go through the process of being a pilot, and then you go through, then it's one of those you have to go back before the legislature to see, okay, are you worthy of making this permanent kind of thing. So,
that's good to know, because if you moved here from another county, every county may have a different process for how they do it. So just because you haven't lived in Rutherford County long, the way we handle our voting may be totally different than the county you were at before.
True, but one thing I do want to clarify, because some people say, well, we don't have precinct voting anymore. We do. Every voter, even in a vote center county like us, you are assigned a precinct. A precinct is a boundary on a map that's dictated by which county commission district you're in, which state house district you're in, which state senate district that you're in. So, but your polling place, people want to say, oh, okay, well, I voted sportscom, so I'm in the sportscom precinct back in the old days. Well, no, you were in what we would call precinct 15-1. You're in the county commission district 15 and the first precinct. But then you would be, okay, well, I'm in 15-2, which is John Pittard, okay, which is just right down the street. What the vote center concept allowed us to do was everybody's still precinct by where their ballot, how their vote reports back to by precinct. But we were able to take 9 locations that were in a 3-mile radius and consolidate. And that helped us from having to buy additional equipment. We were getting more efficient use of our voting equipment. We were getting more efficient use of our poll workers. And one of the biggest things that we have, our poll workers, they're the ones who run elections. I'd love to stand up and say, hey, it's me, but it's the 450 people that we had work on the polls in November of 2024. There's no way this office of 8 could replicate that. It's your neighbors, the people that you go to church with, the people that your kids go to school with. They're the ones who are working the faces that you see at the polling places, and that's what's important is that the polling place and the precinct are 2 different things.
Gotcha. So, if I'm curious about where I can go vote, is there a place I can go look that up?
Absolutely. Now, the 2 best sources of information, I think, one is govotetn.gov, and that's a statewide app that the Secretary of State office has. And of course, we feed information into that. You can actually put in your name, and when you go get ready to vote, it will actually pull up your ballot for you. So
you can see exactly.
So you can see exactly going in. These are the offices that
show up on your ballot.
That will show up on my on my voting machine, and so that way you kind of prepare going in to know exactly. Okay, this is my state rep. This is my county commissioner, and so that can eliminate some concerns there.
Which is great because the Republican Party is doing a voter guide. So you could go on govotetn.gov, you could pull up your ballot, then you could go on the Rutherford County GOP website, pull up our voter guide, and you could actually see everyone that's on your ballot and get to understand who those different candidates are by reading their bios on our voter guide. So, one of the big things that we're pushing is just to keep people informed. We don't want the election process to be intimidating or people not to feel like they can be educated enough to be able to go make that decision. And so what are some other websites? So Go Vote Tennessee or TN.
Also, you can go to RUCO, Rutherford County abbreviation, RUCO.vote. That's our website. Of course, that has local information as well, so you can see a calendar of election dates, early voting, when it is to qualify for office, the qualifying period. There's multifacets of what we do. We deal with voters, we deal with candidates, we deal with citizens who are just moving in and have questions. So there's a kind of a different facets of things that we offer or that we were responsible for within the voting, voting world, so to speak.
So if I move to Rutherford County and I'm not sure if everything's transferred over, should I go on the Go Vote TN site and check that out?
Well, a key word there you mentioned, transfer. If you were a resident in Madison County, Jackson, Tennessee, okay, your voter registration does not transfer.
Okay.
So when you register from one county to another, you have to register to vote in that county. So if you've moved into Rutherford County and you've not registered here, but you were registered in the prior county, you would have to register again in Rutherford County. So it's not like, hey, transfer, my card tags, kind of thing. It's not like that. You have to literally register in the new county. So if you move out of Rutherford County, you would need to register in the same location, your new location.
That's a really good point you just raised, and probably another important thing for us to talk about. So, for those people, if they've moved since the last election cycle, so the last, let's just say, couple of years, and it's not been within Rutherford County, and they may be listening to this, and they want to vote in the May 5th primary, what's the deadline for them to register to vote in that primary?
In Tennessee, you have to register to vote 30 days prior to election day.
Okay.
Which that will be August the 6th for the May election. Now, some people say, well, it needs to be closer to the
April
election
6th.
day. April 6th.
Okay.
And so April 6th for the May 5th election. And some people say, well, it needs to be closer, time. Well, early voting starts 20 days prior. So early voting is going to start April 15th. So we still have to get time to get all of those registrations in, get them processed before, so that time frame is a lot closer to election day. Because some people say, well, we need same day registration, which as an election administrator, I say no.
Because might be a nightmare.
it is a nightmare because, I was telling Ross before we started, in presidential cycles, we'll process 8,000 new registered voters in the last 3 weeks leading up to election day. Because everybody wants to wait till the last minute to get registered or to get their registration changed, change their address. And you can change your address all the way up till election day if the address change has occurred within the county. So if you lived in Smyrna and you moved to Murfreesboro, you can make that change on election day, because what will happen is that change, and it's important because you will be voting in the correct precinct. So your ballot will be precinct in the proper precinct for your vote to count. So to make sure that you have the right county commissioner, the right school board member, and such. So that's very, very important to make sure that you do keep that updated.
So if I lived in Smyrna last year and I moved to the city of Murfreesboro this year, do I need to do anything? Do I need to register or do anything on that front because my district is?
Yeah, because you could be your county commission district might have been District 11, District 12. So you've moved to Murfreesboro and you have a different commissioner. So you will vote in an election that everybody votes in the same election, but your representation, the district that you're in, from a county commission district, from a school board zone, will be different. So you need to make that change prior to, or even, if you don't, you can still make that change on election day. But
or when you show up to early vote.
When you show up to early vote or election day, yes.
So is it better to come in here? So your offices are down here on the square in the city of Murfreesboro. Is it best to come in here? Can I go online and do that?
You can go online to govotn.gov or the GoVoteTN app and do online voter registration, in which you can do a change of address, which is really the same thing. Really what you're doing is you're processing your registration with the new address. We'll get the old address, and we'll make sure that that's updated and changed.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So we were talking about the 3 different opportunities to vote this year. So the first one was May 5th, but you're going to have early voting that starts April 15th, right?
April 15th through April the 30th.
Okay.
Early voting is always 15 days of voting. 20 days before election day, early voting starts. Then it goes on for 15 days, and then it stops 5 days before election day.
So April 15th to April 30th is early voting, and then election day is May 5th.
Correct.
And I can vote anywhere in any of those polling locations, or any of those.
Right. You can go to the ruco.vote and look up polling locations, and you'll see there'll be one of 30. Anybody can vote at any one of those 30 locations.
So I remember we used to get, and you may still send those out, the little cards that you get in the mail. Do you still get those cards, or can I just take my driver's license? What do I need now to vote?
The voter card, yes, we still do the voter cards. And really what that is for is to let you know, okay, this is the address that you're registered to vote. Of course, when someone newly registers, that's how we validate residency. because that's not something that can be forwarded. So if we send Joe Pearl a registration at 123 Main Street and Joe Pearl doesn't live there, the postman will actually kick that back to us. Then at that point, it comes back and says, okay, well, we know that Joe Pearl doesn't live there, so we do not make that voter active, and then we'll start a process and kind of digging to figure out how come that happened.
Okay, so I'm going to come in to vote for the May 5th election. I should bring either that card or my driver's license.
Well, in Tennessee, as of 2011, you have to have a Tennessee voter ID or ID, driver's license, a gun carry permit, a passport, a military ID. So you have to have some form of a state issued ID or a federal issue ID in order to vote. The voter card is handy, but it's not necessary. Your voter ID is what's important, because that's how we say, okay, that's Matt Harriman is Matt Harriman, because we see the ID and we see the picture.
Yeah. Don't bring your electric bill in and plan to vote. You got to have some type of real ID to be able to vote. And it doesn't have to be the new driver's license real ID. It can be, thank you for sharing that.
Right.
So I should bring that in. I'm going to show that to the poll worker. They're going to say, is your address still correct, to make sure that you're voting for the right folks. And then I can go cast my ballot, right?
Yeah, once your ballot application has been processed, and then you'll go into the voting booth, and you'll cast your vote. And one thing that I cannot convey enough, and we do this especially during our training of poll workers, and if you'll see on every machine that we have, there's a sign that hangs there that says, if you have any questions, do not push the red button. Because once you push that red button, there's nothing that can be done. Nothing. And so if you get a ballot for some reason that you think, okay, well, I live in the city, I didn't get a city ballot. Some people think because they have a Murfreesboro mailing address, they're in the city. That's not always the case. But it's better to ask that and verify that before you push the red button. Or we've had a situation one time where, a district boundary line, and I'm just going to use Regency Park Drive, for example. The odd side of Regency Park may be in District 14. The even side could be in District 14, or one in 14, one on 15, because there has to be a line, and you have to have two people. We've had a situation. A lady voted, and she was upset because she wanted to see, Joe Pearl's name on the ballot, because her neighbor across the street had a Joe Pearl sign. Well, Joe Pearl wasn't running in her district, even though she lived right across the street, because they were in a different district. So at that point, but she was not satisfied, because she waited to after
she pressed the red
button to show, okay, Joe Pearl is not on my ballot here. But we were able to explain and show her on a map, okay, the difference. So that was able to bring her some a peace of mind. But a lot of times, and we do have human error. So for some reason in the process, somebody could have pulled up by accident the wrong ballot. And it may have a wrong commissioner, it may have a wrong state representative or something. So if you're expecting or you're going to vote for that person and they're not on your ballot, ask that question before you push the red button.
Okay. So May 5th is just the primary, right? So I think that's an important distinction, in the sense that you're going to show up, you're going to show your ID, and they're going to ask, are you going to vote in the Democratic primary or the Republican primary? Right, and you're going to get different candidates based on who you select for.
Correct.
That's just for the primary. And I think what the confusion sometimes happens is they go in and they vote for Ross for dog catcher in the primary, and they don't realize that they need to come back and vote in the general election if they want to see Ross become the next dog catcher. And so then they need to come back in August. So if you vote on those county races in May, you're just voting in the primary. You need to come back August 6th to vote in the general election for the county, right?
That's correct. Because August 6th will be the county general, but it will also be the state and federal primary.
Right.
So, and I kind of use this analogy of, okay, it's kind of like a basketball tournament. Okay, so you've got these teams that compete in May, and the winners here advance to the next bracket, so which would be in August. So you would have the Democratic nominee, the Republican nominee, and then if there's independent candidates, those will appear on the ballot in August. Then at that point, the winner, it's a winner take all. So whoever has the most votes at that election for that office is the winner. And then September 1st, they'll be sworn in as the new dog catcher for that district. But that's very important. But those and I know this is a GOP podcast, but one misconception is that, okay, they're thinking, okay, how can we have a primary and a general at the same time? Well, your primary is for the state and federal offices, but your general is for your county offices. So sometimes, and then also the Murfreesboro election, municipal election is also held in August too. So really what we're holding 3 elections on the same day. And some people kind of think, okay, well, I want to vote for this person for this office and this person for that office. And then, okay, but then I want to vote for this person in Murphy. So they get kind of confused thinking, okay, well, all right, so I can vote for them, but I can't vote for them. So, it's kind of, so it's the inner workings that sometimes gets confusing for voters.
That's where I think the Go Vote TN site that you mentioned is so important, because you can just simply go on there and you can see exactly, you just need to know that I need to vote 3 times this year.
Right.
And if you put those dates on your calendar, go to the Go Vote TN website and you can see those ballots and you can see, okay, this time I need to know who's running for county. This time I need to know who's running for state or maybe city council or whatever that might be. That's for the August race. And then we've got a race in November that gets even bigger. And that's the one that we tend to know a little bit more about sometimes, because that's the governor's race and some of the federal races. I guess the primary for the governor's race is in August, but then the general for the governor's race is in November. Talk a little bit about the November race.
Okay, so your November election will be your general election from the primary in August. So, and November is our easiest, shortest ballot of all, because you'll have the governor. You may or may not. We will this time have a U.S. Senate office on the ballot, because they fall at odd times because of they're staggered and they're 6-year terms. So you'll have the U.S. Senate. You'll always have a congressional member of Congress on the ballot, and then you'll have your state house, and then sometimes you'll have your state senate. We have 2 state senate districts in Rutherford County, and so one will be on the ballot one cycle, and then one will be on the ballot this cycle, and then one will be on the ballot presidential cycle. So sometimes they go in and think, well, all right, I want to vote for Shane Reeves, but Don White is actually on the ballot. And they'll think, okay, well,
because they're in different districts.
They're in different districts, and then the odd districts run in different cycles, and then the even numbered districts run in different times. So
this year's odd. So Don White will be up this year.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those. I mean, and I mean, sometimes with myself, who I do this every day, and of course, I've been doing this since the late '80s. So it's one of those things, and I still get confused. It's one of those things you just have to walk yourself through. Because which school zones are up, which road zones are up, because they are based off of the county commission districts. So you're just trying to figure out who's on the ballot this time and who's on the ballot next time.
Yeah, I have talked to more people. Matt and I are doing this podcast that have won elections by less than 100 votes. And I'm astounded by the number of people. And some of them are mayor's races that 20 or 30,000 people voted. And Glenn Jacobs, the mayor of Knox County, who is now finishing up his last term, I think he won by 47 votes. It was less than 100 vote. And you think about how important it is, because I think sometimes people look at that and they say, well, I'm just one person. What difference does it make? It makes a huge difference, especially in the local elections. It makes a huge difference.
Well, they can make it in congressional. The first election, when I was hired, I was actually hired, but I came in toward the end of the term. So I didn't administer the election, but that was the August 2014 primary. You had 75,000 some odd votes cast in 15 counties, and a congressional race came down to 37 votes. And I will never forget this. It was my first election as administrator, but like I said, I was here observing. I didn't administer the election because I came in within weeks of it. But I get a phone call from Secretary Hargan. He says, how many provisional ballots did you have? Because, we're the largest county in that district. And I said 14. And a provisional ballot is where, you may have went to the Department of Safety and registered, but for some reason, somehow that information didn't get transmitted back to the election office. So if you did exactly what you're supposed to do, and the error was made with, say, Department of Safety, not transmitting that to us, you vote, but then it's determined whether your vote counts or not. And he said, well, I think we've got a congressional race that's going to come down to provisional ballots. And that was the case. So, we had one election to where one county commission election came down to 3 votes right here in Rutherford County. They actually thought that they had won, but the fail-safe system that we had back then was you had some people who actually who moved into that county commission district. They went and voted, so they hadn't factored in those votes, but it was enough to determine. 2022, I believe it was, or 24, we had an alderman's race in Laverne come down to provisional votes, to where when our commission opened those provisional ballots, it was determined that I think one person had 2 more votes than the other opponent. And so, but there was enough provisional ballots to flip it, to sway it. And so it came down to that point. So every vote does matter.
If I'm not going to be in town during an election cycle, how do I go about picking up, say, an absentee ballot and to be able to vote in that?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that, because we hear a lot of stuff about by mail voting. Now, Tennessee has very strict by mail guidelines. So you have to meet a certain criteria in order to be able to vote by mail. Being out of town, being sick, being hospitalized, if you're over the age of 60, you can vote by mail absentee. But you will actually contact our office in writing stating that you want to vote by mail. And you will have to sign that affidavit. And then we do a signature verification. So we look at that signature on that application request and verify that, okay, that is Joe Pearl. Joe Pearl is my fictitious person. That way I stay out of trouble when you
I think I saw him in the dog catcher.
Yeah, exactly. So Joe Pearl, so you look at that signature and you can tell it doesn't matter. Now, my signature on my registration form when I turned 18 is nothing like it is. I've got I got my medical degree since then. It just scribbles, But I said that jokingly. But anyway, it's not the same. But your stroke is the same, or somebody who's elderly, and so there's the process that we go through to verify. Yes, that person is the person who's requesting this by mail ballot. So we will mail them a ballot, and then when it comes back, there's an affidavit that they have to sign on that ballot. And then we do another signature verification. And if it doesn't match, that ballot will get rejected. And I have rejected some ballots because you can clearly see that's not the proper person. Or even on the absentee request. And some people think, well, it doesn't really mean anything. They're just doing it because their parent is elderly or whatever. and then we notify, say this has been rejected. Well, then, I'll get my mother-in-law, my mother, or whatever, and then they go through that process. They're fortunate they got time that they can do that, but your signature on that is very important. So at that point, you're mailed a ballot, and you can vote. You're out of town for business or for vacation or whatever, and then it comes back, and then we have a counting board, which will be of equal number members of the counting board will be Republican and Democrat, and then they'll go through. You have a Democrat member and a Republican member, and then they go through and they open those and they verify all the stuff that needs to be verified there, and then they'll go through and they'll count those by mail ballots.
That's good. So as we kind of wrap up here, a few things I'd like to hear, and we may have touched on some of this, but what are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about how elections work?
Well, first of all, there was a misconception out there at one time that we don't count the early votes. We count. I vote early, and so I'm gonna make sure. I'm not gonna vote, and not count my vote or my family's vote, kind of thing. So every vote gets counted, because there was something out there on the internet at one time that, well, if you vote before a certain time and a certain date, those ballots may or may not get counted. Every single vote counts. Some people say there's a misconception out there that that we mail everybody a ballot. That's not the case in Tennessee. The voter has to request it, and then there's signature verification, criteria that has to be met before that ballot is ever sent. And then when the ballot's sent, as I mentioned a while ago, it still has to meet that criteria on that ballot. So those are really two things, and I can say this with 110% certainty. When we leave here election night, I can go lay my head down on my pillow, and know that the will of the people was carried out because the votes were counted in the way the votes were cast.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of frustration in our country the last few years because around election integrity, and I think it's great to hear. We're requiring a photo ID. You can't just come in and say I'd like to vote, and you let them proceed with the ballot. The state has actually won some awards. You want to talk a little bit about some of the awards we've won?
Yeah, and glad to be a part of this. For the last 4 years, the Heritage Foundation has actually awarded Tennessee as the #1 state in the nation for election integrity. And there's a pretty stringent report card that they that they go by. And so, can we do better? We can always improve. But the main thing is that that we are leading the pack of all the states, and voter ID, in my opinion, is what kind of leads that, because we know that when Matt Harriman and Ross Bradley come in and vote, we know that's who's voting. Because it could be situations to where, Joe Pearl Jr. and Joe Pearl are coming in to vote. Well, we know for sure, okay, that's junior and that's senior, because we verified it through the photo ID.
Well, you may not like the outcome of the election, but one thing's for certain: if you come in and vote, it's going to be a fair process. And I think a lot of people should take heart in that. It should encourage people to want to participate in the process because it is fair. Everybody's been giving an equal opportunity, and the fact that our state has won this award several times goes to show that the system's working. So.
Yes, and another misconception is thinking, okay, we can do all this in one day. We only should have 1 day of voting. With 162,000 votes in a presidential election, that's almost impossible to do. Number one, we don't have the ability to have that many polling locations to be able to process that many people on one single day. And plus there's people that have, there's some issues that do pop up that give you a chance to we had one time, we had two voters had the same name, and the signatures was almost identical. But there were two little intricate details of the signature that separated the two. But when you're sitting here on that one day, and because you want to make sure that everybody who has a right to vote gets an opportunity to vote. So there is a misconception out there. Oh, we can do this all in one day. That's a tough task. But the number of days, I'll let the legislature deal with that. But the fact is, of trying to pull it off all in one day, that is a monumental task.
Any parting thoughts? Anything we didn't cover?
Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody who steps forward to serve as a poll worker.
Yeah,
because they are the ones who run and conduct our elections. It's not me. I'm the referee that says, okay, I'm gonna blow the whistle when you get outside the line, so to speak. We're going to do it by what the law dictates how we're supposed to do it, but it's our poll workers, and the average age of our poll workers, from the young to old, is right at 72 years of age.
Interesting.
Almost 50% of our poll workers are over the age of 65. So those are long days for them. But the fact is that they're our neighbors are the ones that make this process work. So I just want to give a big shout out to them, because they're the ones who should get the medallion, the gold medal for conducting elections. I'm just glad to be honored to be the one to making sure that we're doing it right.
If someone had time to want to be a poll worker, would they just contact your office and get signed up to do that?
Yeah, they can contact our office. They can go online on that ruco.vote and fill out an application, or they can contact our office at 615-898-7743 and say, hey, I want to be a poll worker, work a poll, and we will actually do our best to get back with them within minutes of the time that they call. No, I say that jokingly, but no, pretty quick at getting a call back. But we're always looking for people who have the ability and time to step forward and be a poll worker.
That's great. Alan, thank you so much. This has been so helpful. As we sit and we have these podcasts, one of the things we want to do is inform you, not just so that you can have the information, but that you can share them with your neighbors, your friends, your families, your coworkers, so that we can become more informed, because it's important that we get out and we participate in this process. We elect those people that represent us, and we have an obligation and responsibility to do that. And so share this information with your friends. We appreciate you tuning in our podcast. If you like the content, make sure you like and subscribe and follow us as we continue to have these in the future.